And for this one, I wanted to play with textures a little bit. So I have a large natural hair brush. I'm going to experiment with some dry brush technique. Definitely want to use ink wash. So dry brush is basically exactly what it sounds like. If you dip your brush into your ink well, just get some of the ink or most of the ink off of it, and when you make a brush stroke, that's what you get. You'll get the dry brush look, and it almost looks like a grainy, noisy texture. And I want to try ink wash. The basic idea is just watering down your ink so that you get grays. I definitely still want to use some hatching. So hatching is just using parallel lines to show tone. And I definitely want to use splattering, both using ink and white gouache. We're just gonna have a lot of fun with textures on this piece. The wasteland is a very gritty world. It's dusty. So Max is mostly a silhouette in my thumbnail. But since I'm drawing a big version of it, I'm gonna have all these textures in it. But I still want to capture the feeling of the thumbnail. My plan is to do an ink wash over Max so that he definitely is part of the dark shape, the dark silhouette within this light colored door frame. I love the idea of working efficiently, so using a large brush to cover a large area feels very satisfying. So I want to play with the idea of keeping it loose on purpose. I think that will help capture mood. I also want to capture likeness, and I want to make sure that the main elements are identifiable, such as his shotgun. So with the big brush, I cover the largest parts, some areas where I think would benefit from the texture of dry brush. The next step is moving on to little details, really trying to get a likeness on his face, capturing the shape of the hair. I'm thinking about how do I solve the problem of the background? How do I draw the flames and the smoke? All of us have a tendency to evenly space out the lines between different layers of smoke. I want to make sure that each layer of smoke has like a random spacing in between so that they're not all evenly spaced apart. I don't want to make all the curves similar. I want to make like a big arc followed by several smaller arcs. I want the dominant light to be on his left shoulder, so I'm gonna keep his left cheek light. The bounce light is gonna be coming from his bottom right, so I'm gonna leave some bounce light on the bottom right of his jacket. I like inking figures with the Winsor Newton brush, series 7. If you're just starting out, I recommend using the smaller numbers like number 0, 1, and 2. But once you get the hang of inking, I think the larger sizes are better because you can get very, very thin lines, and you can at the same time getting a very thick line without changing tools, and that saves time. So I'm using a number 3. For the pens, there's some technical things, stuff that is mechanical, like the gun or the ammo clips. It's easier to work on those with a pen. Man-made things, sometimes you're on a roll and it's best to do all the mechanical things at once, and then switch to the brush to do organic elements. The rest of this is pretty much drawing from reference. Found reference for a shotgun. On his jacket, I use a little bit of hatching or feathering. Feathering is basically like hatching, except one side is thicker than the other side. You kind of get like a saw teeth type of look. In the foreground, I want to have a table with maybe a broken doll or some kind of object. Maybe it's something he's looking for. I don't want it to be just him in a doorway. I want it to have a story element, but I don't want to focus on it too much. So it's gonna be like a suggestion of an actual thing. I think he has an attachment to the old world. He's the type of character that even in potential danger, he has a very human interest to look at personal things because it reminds him of his own life, one that he's lost or failed to protect. He's seeking redemption, and I think these objects tell that story of a man with regret and guilt. Anyways, these are the things that go through my mind for story and character. If I'm inventing a new character, I'm always trying to think of story elements or perhaps establish characters that have similarities. For Max's outline, I'm thinking about line variation, and I definitely want to keep the outline thick, but not an equal fixed width. I want to vary the lines because it just looks more natural and it lets me play with edges. We could have a lost edge or we could have a soft edge when I go in with the ink wash. So lastly, I want to soften up the image a little bit, introduce the element of particles. It's just fun to do some ink splattering. Some people do this with a stiff hair toothbrush. They would just dip the toothbrush into the ink and bend the bristles and let it flicker on the paper. I'm using a brush and I'm just flicking it off of the end of another brush. And the idea is to have little black particles in the light areas and little white particles in the black areas, which will help soften the harshness of the solid blacks. This is sort of the fun part. Then I'm gonna do ink wash. So I mixed some water with ink and made it a light gray. It's always a good idea to start light and then darken it. The idea here is vignetting. Vignetting means darkening the corners of the image. Since Max is a dark shape, when I vignette the space out of the door frame, it'll put white right next to the dark silhouette. That is the area where the eyes will be drawn to immediately, the focal point. And my plan is to keep the bottom half of his body more simple, but for his head, I want to show his identity, even though it's silhouetted and he's backlit. I still want to show his likeness, and I still want him to be identifiable. I'm gonna kind of cheat his head with the lighting and make it a little bit lighter than the bottom half of his body. So it's kind of like a gradient of detail from the top to the bottom, where the top will be very, very accurate where his head is. The bottom will be more suggestive and simple. This is a good technique to guide the viewer's eyes. So while I'm doing the ink wash, I'm still thinking about my thumbnail. I do want the top to look lighter, so it has like a organic gradation from light on top to dark on the bottom. To make sure that Max is dark shape, I just do an ink wash over his whole figure. Squint your eyes to look at it to make sure that you have the same feeling that you establish in your thumbnail. Everything kind of blurs out when you step back and get further away from your piece. Lastly, for white gouache is the best because it's very opaque. Water it down with some water, and then using the same technique of flicking the brush off of the end of another brush, we can add white particles. Use the cheat sheet, it's helpful for me anyways. And that's all for this week, guys. Thanks for watching, and I look forward to seeing your work. Until next time, thanks.